welcome to Exposing Truth Ministry. And today we have a special guest, David from Truthseeker Ministry. You can find David at Truthseeker.Church. Now, in this day and age, when every wind of doctrine is blowing, we need to be anchored on a solid foundation. Yes, Christ is the solid rock on which we are to stand. Christ, the head of the church, has in these last days, according to Bible prophecy, raised up a church to bring the truth to the world, which is to herald and usher in his return. Today, we want to welcome David. Thank you, David Allen from Truthseeker.Church, for stopping by to share some very interesting facts with us. Now, anyone studying history, and this can be found online, at least for now, can look up the topic of the Dark Ages. This is a period of time that has not been talked about as much as in the past. But I will tell you, there was a period of time, which was prophesied in the Bible, where the church, which Christ himself started with his apostle, after the apostle's death, plunged into grievous darkness. The Bible was kept away from people. Millions of Christians lost their lives because they wanted to follow the dictate of their consciences. Christians were being killed by other Christians. In those dark days, the tradition of men, the church father, held their sway. Now, God used different individuals whom we have come to refer to as reformers to restore Bible truth, bringing light to the world again. David, can you recall the list of the churches that were raised up in their order and during the Reformation, and some of the names of the reformer? Can you just give us a little summary of what that all about?
Well, thank you for having me. First off, I'll start with the reformers and then perhaps the name of the movement that gathered around them as a result. That's easier for me to think about. And I'll start with John Wickliffe, who was in England. The time frame is the 1300s. He was a scholastic philosopher, a theologian, Catholic priest, a Bible translator of sorts, a seminary professor in his day at the University of Oxford. Wickliffe came from a well-to-do family with money. He was known as a reformer as he became a strong influencer within the Catholic priesthood during the 14th century. And he attacked the abuses of the Catholic Church that were happening. Those in leadership roles were more concerned with worldly things and selfishness than heavenly things and being a servant to the community. Wickliffe would be called by some, looking back to what had developed, as the morning star of the Reformation movement. From his efforts, the Lollards movement came about in 1374. And he was the first that I know of that did translation work from the Vulgate to English. Some say the Gospels of the New Testament, others credit him with more work than that. But either way, God was using him to strip away the onion. I refer to it as the onion that the Catholic Church had become, encapsulating Christianity with power, control, and false dogma. Now get this, he died on the last day of 1384 at the age of 56.
Pretty young.
But we're talking about 31 years later at the Council of Constance in 1415, they declared him a heretic and banned his writings. This is after he's already dead. And excommunicated him after he's already dead. They hated him badly at this point. Because of his work, it was almost like he was still alive as people were waking up to the errors of the denomination. They hated him so bad, order was made by the council that his work should be burned and his remains should be dug up from his grave and burned. This was done, and the ashes were spread in the River Swift, which flows through Lutterworth, England. I mean, can you imagine?
Imagine after the man is dead, you dig him up and you burn it. But you know what is interesting is that what they meant for bad, because this was how many years after. I'm sure it made people probably want to know, who is this guy? Why is he hated so much? What
Yes.
did he write? So it probably served to even push the gospel forward even more. Is there anyone else?
Yeah, I'm sure he had an influence on Jan Hus, who was born to poor parents in Bohemia. At an early age, Jan had supported himself by singing and serving in churches, and he would be very instrumental in moving the Protestant Reformation forward. He would end up going to college, getting a degree, and then he served in the Catholic Church as a priest. But over time, he too realized some of the practices of this denomination, and it was really bothering him. Over time, he was called before bishops and cardinals, and they stated that he was a heretic and demanded that he recant based on his writings. He revealed some of their errors in his teachings, and he had lots of writings. He would eventually be burned at the stake in the same year, 1415, the same year that Wickliffe was dug up from the grave and burned. As a result of Jan Hus, the Hussite movement would be born in Bohemia as a result of his efforts. And they would beat back for many years the papal efforts to rule over them. This was known as the Hussite Wars. I mean, this is some pretty significant stuff.
These things they don't tell people in school these days. I don't remember learning this in school, but
it wasn't until about 200 years later that through the Battle of White Mountain, they called it, that Catholicism would gain back control and have a place in the lives of the Bohemian and the Moravian populations. And then we get into the next century, and it's like the Protestant Reformation is busting out all over Europe. To start with, we have the Anabaptists. These early believers formed a confession of faith around 1527. A guy by the name of Michael Sattler presided over a meeting at the Swiss-German border where they drew up their confession of faith. And this was called, I think I have the pronunciation right, the Schleitheim Confession. And this Michael Sattler, he would be arrested and executed afterwards. This is where water baptism begins.
Okay.
They were highly opposed to infant
So when you
baptism.
say water baptism begin, so you're saying that there was a time, because I remember Jesus, when he was baptized, he was plunged in the water and he was taken up. And so then you say this guy brought in water baptism. So something had happened. People had stopped getting baptized with water.
I don't really know, but just it's well noted in the Reformation movement that water baptism wasn't being done that I'm aware of until the Anabaptists started doing it.
I think what happened, it could be that they were sprinkling instead.
There you go. You had the infant baptism, then you had the sprinkling.
The sprinkling. So probably that's it. Okay.
I mean, Rome had controlled Christianity for decades and centuries and centuries, So now the control was starting to be loosened.
Okay.
So they realized that the candidates for baptism, they needed to freely confess their faith in Christ, and you can't do that when you're 1 or 2 years old or even a small child so much. And other things that would come out from their confession of faith would be church discipline, the Lord's Supper, separating from the world and evil, selection of pastors and their role, a nonviolent stance when needed, and a prohibition of oath swearing. Like you couldn't do, I so solemnly swear, whatever. The Amish and the Hutterites and the Mennonites, they're direct descendants of this early Anabaptist movements. They're additional faiths, denominations. And the Swiss Brethren, they would be born out of this as well. First, they separated from the Anabaptists. Then it was the Swiss Reformation that happened. And then they realized they needed to come out again, and they would become their own movement, the Swiss Brethren. But one of the biggest well-known names in the Protestant movement from Germany would be, of course, Martin Luther. His efforts would catapult what is known as the Lutheran Church today. And the good thing here was he wasn't killed or burned, or that kind of thing.
I'm sure it's probably not that because they didn't try to, or
they were after him. Yes, there's a story where he was called to a council, and he was there going on horseback with an associate or two, and they were meaning to capture him and kill him, Rome, through their soldiers or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And God sent Arabs to
Mm.
intercept the travel of those men that were going to do harm to Luther.
Mm-hmm.
And that changed their plans completely.
Amen.
So Martin Luther continued.
Okay.
But, God is shining light little by little throughout Europe. And Martin Luther, his role is in the 1500s. And it's mostly these Catholic priests that are discovering what they've been told is wrong. And all of a sudden a light goes off. They wake up and say, hey, wait a minute, this is error. We can't do this. We can't teach this. I mean, paying money to your dead relative from purgatory into heaven. Come on. The dead don't know anything. There's no purgatory. And then you have fundraising efforts where the Catholic Church is selling indulgences. It's a way to forgive sin or lessen the burden of how your sin is weighed on you. This is the kind of thing that was going on in Martin Luther's day.
Mm.
Luther ended up Luther ended up putting together a list of grievances that he had with the church, and it was nicknamed the 95 Thesis. And in 1517, he hammers this to the All Saints Church doors in Wittenberg, Germany. This is definitely one way to get yourself disfellowshipped or excommunicated. We can relate to that.
Yes.
He would translate the New Testament from Greek into the German language instead of Latin, and others would help complete the Old Testament. Martin Luther would be the first to marry and take a wife, and this would set an example going forward for others that wanted to be clergy outside the Catholic Church.
Mm.
Now, here's something that was very instrumental in my life as far as inspiration.
Okay.
This reformer was not a Catholic priest. His rise was in the early 1500s as well, and his name was William Tyndale.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people haven't heard of him, perhaps, but he was influenced by Martin Luther. Mm-hmm. Luther's in Germany and Tyndale's in England. We keep getting some influence in England, but this guy's not a priest, but a Bible scholar and a well-educated man. He'd be the first of his time to translate the Bible from Hebrew and Greek into English. And he took advantage of the invention of the printing press. I can relate to that. He had to work undercover, though, as this was not a popular thing amongst the rulers of the day. It was a direct threat and challenge to the Catholic Church and the laws of England, maintaining the church's position. Now the common man could read and understand the Bible for himself without a priest telling him what to believe. Mm. So that's when you get into the errors. The priest can add things, and come up with all kinds of mystical things. Mm-hmm. So this is one way to circumvent heresies. And Tyndale's work, he'd have a next great influence into the next century on the work that would become the King James Bible in 1611. Mm-hmm. Even though Tyndale had already passed away, the influence still remained.
Yes, he granted a foundation. Mm-hmm.
In Tyndale's life, he was always in danger because of the work he did. He found himself fleeing from authorities many times. His work was lost at sea at one point with a shipwreck, and he managed to redo the New Testament afterwards, but he never got to redo the Old Testament. And eventually he would be captured and jailed near Brussels and convicted of heresy. And then in 1536, however, he was strangled as a courtesy because of his stature and education. And then they burned his body at the stake.
So it wasn't enough to just kill him by strangulation. They had to go and burn him on top of that. No, and to think that the people that are doing this to Tyndale is a Bible believer. The people that are doing this are thinking that they're doing this for God, because they're supposed to be worshipers of God. They're supposed to be, this is just absolutely amazing. And we're told, we need to study history because history will repeat itself, and history is going to be repeat itself. Is there anything else you can tell us about the Reformation going forward?
Quickly, as the Reformation moved forward, you had it spread to the Netherlands with the Mennonites and the Reformed Church, the Polish Reformed Church in Poland, the Congregationalist, Methodist, Episcopals in England, Presbyterians in Scotland, Unitarianism in Romania, Baptist in Holland. And then in the US, as you reach the 1800s and 1900s, an explosion of new denominational names comes about. United Brethren of Christ, Latter-day Saints, and they had many splinter groups. Christian Reformed Church, Jehovah's Witnesses, which many people are familiar with that name, Salvation Army, Assemblies of God, Pentecost, United Church of Christ. And then we have a truth that was shown to a trace of reformers that wasn't so common. And that was the day of worship, dealing with the day of worship. The majority were keeping the changes Rome had made as far as the day of worship, but you had Seventh-day Baptist, you had Sabbatarian Baptist, and then we have the Seventh-day Adventist Church, which would come out from all kinds of denominations like Methodists and Baptists that were keeping Sunday.
So I guess we said then God raised up the Seventh-day Adventist Church, building on the truth of previous reformers. You know, I've heard it said that some people say that Ellen White started the Seventh-day Adventist Church and formulated the doctrines. Is that true?
I would not say that specifically. It was started more so as an effort by her husband, James White, and a retired sea captain, Joseph Bates. James White and Bates came from the Christian Connection and Congregationalist background. So their take on the personality of God, it didn't come with an onion of Rome around it. The doctrines would take some time to establish. Instead of being led by a university of theologians, they were led by the Spirit of God. And this was not some, mystery ghost. They passed through a special experience in the 1840s with the preaching of William Miller, and with that, the expectation that Christ was going to come in 1844. But after that disappointment, they doubled down in prayer. And Ellen White she stated, searching for truth like hidden treasure.
Let me also say this, because, it is said that the Seventh-day Adventist Church had set a date that Jesus was going to return in 1844. But at that time, the Seventh-day Adventist Church wasn't formed yet. This was the Millerite movement.
Right.
And it was after the disappointment, as you are saying here, they went to search for truth as for a hidden treasure. And what happened?
The Adventist Church would form in the 1850s and officially incorporate in 1863.
Okay.
But they were together as a group in the 50s. But besides, these main three, you had Stephen Pierce and Hiram Edson also notably documented, involved in this deep prayer day and night, trying to formulate their studies and doctrine. And there might have been others involved as well, like George Storrs, David Hewitt, Roswell Cottrell, maybe Joseph Frisbee and Joseph Wagner. They were around at that time. Sister White, she'd get confirmation of these things through vision. But prior to that, as she stated, she could not comprehend the meaning of the scriptures they were studying until then. Many people think Ellen White ran things, but it was the men in leadership roles that addressed doctrine and ran the denomination. However, she was there influencing things through her writings. She was really keen about the Sabbath in her time, and later on, she stressed health reform in a big way. Many people think she was always in control of these things, especially later in life, but she wasn't. I mean, she got sent off reluctantly to Australia against her will in the early 1890s for about 10 years.
Interesting. Today, when we look at the Seventh-day Adventist Church, what the church believed when Ellen White and the other Seventh-day Adventist pioneers were alive, if we compare them to what the current church, the current corporate SDA church, if we compare them, we will find very significant differences in the belief. Without saying what these differences are, would you agree to that? That the church today, the Seventh-day Adventist corporate church today, is very different from the church that was raised up by God to the pioneers?
Absolutely, yes.
In fact, David, a current theologian, Seventh-day Adventist theologian, George Knight, he wrote that the Seventh-day Adventist pioneers would not be allowed to join the current Seventh-day Adventist Church because of a particular doctrine that is now being taught within Seventh-day Adventism. You know, when I learned that for the first time, that piqued my antennas went up. And I'm like, why would the founders of the church that God raised up would not join the church? And, you know, for people who are watching this, if you have never checked that out, maybe you should. Maybe you should, because I believe God raised this church up in truth, not in error. And if the pioneers would have an issue joining the church today, that could be something that needs to be investigated.
It would be foreign to them.
Exactly. So, you know, if you want to learn more truth about what our pioneers believe, let me just say, viewers, please feel free to go to www.Truthseeker.Church. No, I said .church because, you know, a lot of times when I was looking up, people are used to .org, .com, .this. It's Truthseeker.Church. The Truth Seeker ministry, it says, helping Adventists find their roots through the discernment of truth and error. Are you an Adventist? Are you a Seventh-day Adventist? Truthseeker.Church can help you find your root. Go back to the old path. Go back to the truth that God gave to this great movement. Now, briefly, can you tell us briefly, how did your ministry at Truthseeker.Church get started? Tell us a little bit about your ministry.
You know, my background of being a fifth generation Adventist, my parents told me stay out of getting elected in the church. You know, keep a back seat to things. Don't get involved, because we believed differently than what was happening in today's church, because we believe like the pioneers. And I won't get into those details, you know, so much here. You can find that on different things on the page of the website. But I had put together some what I call white papers, different topics that I shared with people, trying to get them to Bible study. People had gotten lazy. And one thing led to another, and a person said, you need to put all these things into a book. And then I started doing that and started formulating some small booklets. And I was using a source outside the state where I'm at to get those printed. And I found that the timeline was reasonable, but by the time I had freight involved getting them to me, I just couldn't turn on a dime as fast as I needed to. And that perhaps I needed to start printing myself. And then Brother Linford Beachy, I had happened to visit him in Oklahoma, and he showed me his operation, and he offered to give me a printer, but it needed repair. And on my drive back to New York, I'm kind of like, want to get things done. I don't want to wait and mess around. And I already found a source for a printer, and you could say, I know a guy who knows a guy in New Jersey. And that guy has been my source ever since for my printers that I have purchased. And I've already run out. I've run some, exhausted them, and had to get new, replacement printers since then. But yeah, it's Linford's fault for doing this.
So, David, I know that you're a professional in the business world of corporate America, but you still put in very long hours working to get books out and get materials printed and distributed. Do you sell your books and the materials?
Well, I put together a price list, but it's kind of a suggested donation. It's not so much I'm selling books. I mean, I just ship them out. And if people can donate, fantastic. Because when I ship stuff overseas, it's rare that anyone can pay for it. In well-developed countries, Australia, Canada, are two examples that come to my head. Those folks send donations, and that helps a lot. Helps tremendously. When you get into the outreaches of some of the poorer nations and stuff, it's all on you. Yeah. Go ahead.
So I was just saying, because I know I've personally benefited from your hard work. I remember as I was sharing Bible truth with some Seventh-day Adventists in Jamaica, that I needed some materials, and I called you, and you willingly shipped boxes, not just to one person, to different places in Jamaica for me, and I was grateful. And I know there are many other people who call on you to do the same. So where are some countries that you have shipped books and materials to? Can you remember some of those countries?
Yeah, besides North America, US and Canada, the Philippines, of course. I have a man that's working the message in South Korea. He's near a military base for the US, and he goes and visits those guys and other local people. Australia, and down there in the Caribbean, St. Lucia, Jamaica, as you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Over in Africa, Uganda, Zimbabwe, South Africa, Kenya, Zambia, Ghana, England, shipped to England, India, Pakistan, Nigeria, and Fiji Islands also.
Wow, that's interesting. And I know those of you who have attended camp meetings, special camp meetings all over the US, would have seen your books, because even if you are not there, you send your books along. And one of the things I'll see people go and they'll take books, and I know that our brethren probably do not understand that these things actually cost, because there are people who will stock up, and sometimes I don't see them leaving an offering, and that kind of bothers me a little bit from time to time. And if I'm at these camp meetings, I've made public announcement for different groups, because when people publish and print, these things are not free. We know salvation is free, but it does cost to get the gospel across. So to me, David, since I've known you, you seem to work your day job and plunge your personal income into the printing business. How do you stay afloat financially? I just don't see it, because I know that the printing thing, or one printer breaks, to replace it, it's thousands of dollars. It seemed like you basically work your day job so that you can print to do God's work.
Yeah. Sometimes I don't even know how it happens. Yahweh just provides, because I have an office space that I rent that costs real money.
So you said, but funny. So you said you have an office space, because that's one of my questions I was going to talk with you, because I think the first time several years ago you were printing out of your home, but no, you actually rent an office space.
No, I start from an office from the beginning.
Oh, it was from well, probably I was assuming that it was your home. So you have been not only purchasing printers and the papers and putting in time, you actually have to pay rent.
Yes.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
And just this past week, Canon Tech was in, and I needed a new upper fixing belt unit for one of my Goliath printers, I call them. They're very big. It was $1,000 part, $270 in labor. Have a nice day. It's like, that's some real money. And if someone wants to donate, by all means, please help. I welcome it. In the very beginning, I wasn't taking donations, didn't even want to entertain it. And I had friends who are like, look, if you take donations, you can do more. And I realized
exactly.
After a few months, I realized this is going to take more than what I can just kind of to finance. And then since then, the economy's gotten tougher.
Mm-hmm.
My business has gotten harder to even maintain and manage. And so it is really a struggle these days. Some months, I don't know how things get paid, but they somehow just happen, and I have not used ministry money donations for rent. I don't use it for salaries or anything like that. It goes into hardcore printing expenses, freight, things of that nature.
Oh, so no, David, I know personally that you have experienced some serious health issues. There have been times when I honestly thought you were going to lay the mantle down, because you have gone through a lot. Those attempts at your life, I believe that the enemy of souls, Satan, wants to get you out. He wants to take you out, and he's angry about the work that you have been doing. But I see where God has been preserving you and has continued to use you. So I don't want you to list your health challenges that you're having, but I would ask our viewers that are watching to please remember David in prayer when you're praying. Remember him in prayer, and that we pray for you and pray for the work that you're doing. I know that there are other ministries out there that are carrying on the printing work, and immediately some ministries that come to my mind readily. Gospel Sounders Ministry in Kenya. I know that they're big in getting the work done, and I think you have actually helped them, David, in the beginning. And also there is Smyrna Gospel Ministry from West Virginia. They do a fantastic job printing as well. And there's also Linford Beachy in Oklahoma. And these are some ministries that I've supported in the past. And I didn't even know that Linford had a hand in you, inspiration in getting you started there, David. So they do a good deal of printing as well. And I've supported those ministries in the past as well, and still do recommend that people, support when as God leads you. But today I want to focus on Truthseeker.Church, Truth Seeker Ministry. There have been times when folks who have requested that you send books without giving you a penny, without complaining. David, you send the books, boxes of them. There are some who requested that you send books and material and give you donation. No, some of those donations don't even cover the shipping costs, but you still send the material. Now, I know you don't necessarily sell the books. You might make suggestion in terms of, people want to give donation. But tell me, David, if you could quantify, what would you estimate the cost for printing and mailing at least one box of books? Say somebody like, okay, I'm going to send request for a box of book to go here or go here. What would be a kind of size of a donation that would cover, okay, this cover all the costs, for me, what it takes, the material, the time, the box. Yeah. Can you think of any?
Well, I'll just give you a freight number. Your medium-sized post office box size box, which is about letter size.
Yeah.
A piece of paper and 6 inches high. That'll cost about $100 to get it overseas. And then the box that might be 12 inches square and 6 inches high, that might be about 120, 130, to get overseas somewhere.
But that's just the shipping cost. What about the material what about the material that's inside the box?
I don't really put a number on it. I don't,
because the point is, it costs. And that's my point that I'm trying to share with people that are watching this. It does cost to get the paper, to get the printer, to get the time, to do all of that. And I think, some of the health issues, David, is because you really run yourself thin. Because having to do a full-time job and to do this other ministry full-time is really, really very difficult. And I want you to know that I personally do appreciate the work that you do. You have blessed my life. You have blessed people that I've studied with. And I know if someone wants to support your ministry right now, you don't feel like, okay, I don't need any books. So you don't have to buy the books. You can go online, Truthseeker.Church, www.truthseeker.Church, and make that donation. There are ways in which how can, if a person wants to help you going online there, is there any other way that they can send funds to you?
Yeah, they can have a PayPal link right there on the homepage. The PayPal me name is Truthseeker Min, MIN. They can email me for other payment types, check, money order, Zelle. They can do that at Adventist@Truthseeker.Church. And if you're going to a conference corporation church, you need to realize that the conference, the General Conference Corporation of Seventh-day Adventists, have a tremendous amount of tithes and offering investments that are in the worldly stock market. I have a statement of their investments from 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's mind-blowing because it's U.S. Treasury yields, it's in risky mortgages, it's in airline stocks, it's in banks, it's in other things. And I'm just flabbergasted that it's not in water wells in Africa, that it's not in Bibles, that it's not in, small churches and in other ways to help, mosquito nets in certain parts of Africa and things where we can really make a difference in people's lives. And here it is, by the gross amount of money, it would just make you sick to know it.
It's just very sad. And here you have people, and I'm glad that God is raising up people who realize that this work need to go forward. This work need to go forward, and God is raising people up to step out by faith. And I thank you so much, David, for stopping by at Exposing Truth Ministry. Thank you for your continued willingness to share God's truth in the printed pages. And I would like to thank you, viewers, for watching and for visiting the website, www.Truthseeker.Church. Browse around and order materials, and very importantly, make a donation. You can give a one-time donation in any amount, or you can make donation given to Truthseeker.Church a regular part of your offering, your tithes and offering. You know, you could decide to do it monthly, you could decide to do it weekly, you could decide to do it quarterly, however God impresses you to get this work across. We're told that the books need to be spread like the leaves of autumn. You know, one wonders why David would remain in this business, and I probably should even call it this ministry, which does not provide financial gain, you know, but David loves the Lord and wants the gospel of the kingdom to be preached into all the world. God bless you and your family and your ministry, David, and may God bless all those also who will choose to pray for this ministry and also to contribute financially to this ministry to get the gospel. I want to go home. And I know Jesus wants to come and get his children. And we're told this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached into all the world as a witness. Let's do our part. You know what? I can't go to Kenya. I can't go to Uganda. I might not be able to go to Australia, but David can send a box book there where I can. So there are ways in which God is using to finish this work. Won't you join us to be a part of spreading the truth as it is in Jesus? Thank you for watching, and please share this video so your family and friends can learn about the great resources that are available at Truthseeker.Church. Tons and tons of resources available. Truthseeker.Church. And to help to share the gospel. Thank you. God bless you.